Hi there, my name is Jay with Server Matter and with CompuMatter, and the purpose of this video is to teach my future self, and you in the process, how to share a single large backup drive with multiple virtual machines in Proxmox so that you can make the most use of your megabytes or gigabytes in the event that you just don't need that much on any one. Now, there are a couple ways that this can be done. One of them involves the use of a program named NFS kernel server, which you can see I have running in the background. And there's a file called etc export. And if your virtual machines are on the same network, you can use that method to connect them all, to create it on your host and to serve it, to share it in your guests. But in this particular case, our virtual machines are in fact on different networks and cannot see each other that way. So the only way that if the other method works for you, do some research on that, and that will solve your problem. And the advantage of that is it gives you one large drive, and then you can just create directories to back up things on an as-needed basis. But when they are on separate networks, as ours is, we need to partition this one drive roughly in the size that we think we're going to need in our different VMs, and then those partitions can be accessible by the individual guests. So let's proceed with that method now. Okay, so I've just run fdisk and grep for any SD drives, and that reveals the 14.5 terabyte drive that we're going to use in our example. So next I'm going to run hdparm to view the sector size of the hard drive. Now, I am no expert in this area, and I have to refer to documentation. But in some cases, they both come up as 4096. In some cases, it comes up as 512, but indicates that it supports 4096, which is an important characteristic. A lot of your consumer level drives are just going to be 512 and no support for 4096. But if it does, your performance of the drive will increase if your partition matches that 4096 structure. So I'm going to refer to my documentation, and we're going to make that happen. So the next thing we're going to do is run this command, hdparm, set the sector size to 4096, please destroy my drive, and tell it what drive we're talking about. Now this gives us an error, and I'm not sure why. I ran it by ChatGPT, and it indicated that even though it said it supports it, it probably doesn't. There may be more to it than that. If you're a hard drive specialist, I'm not. Please reply to this and be glad to hear what you have to say. All right, so for the rest of this, I'm going to show you the parted command and the make part command as a one-liner. I could have broken this down into separate steps, but this really gets the job done. It's a one-liner, and you've got your three partitions. Starting off with parted, the script flag, of course, the SDG target in our case, make label GPT, and here comes the making the partitions themselves. We start off at the 2048 sector mark. Now, some people are going to tell you to use 1 megabyte there, 1 capital M, lowercase I, capital B, in a similar case that you see over here. But I have found that causes a failure and alignment problems and alignment errors when you run fdisk and commands like that. It clearly picks up that the alignment is not correct. 2048 sector, specifically fine-graining that eliminates the problem. So we're going to go from 2004, which by the way is at about the 1 megabyte area of the drive, and that leaves a little bit of padding on the drive for the drive's own purposes, or the hardware manufacturer, or whatever that may be. That's the recommended model. So then we go to 5 terabytes. That's going to be our first partition. The next one's going to be 5 to 10. The next one's going to be 10 to whatever's left of the drive, 100%. This section in here is primarily to create a little space between the time we've created the partitions and the time that we want to format them as ext4s, because I have found if I don't create a little lag in between and maybe a detection, then it's not ready and the command fails. So this succeeds. And then we're going to create our first file system at 4096 for STG1, 4096 sector for SDG2, and so on for SDG3. We'll press that Enter key, and this is going to take, maybe 30 or 40 seconds. Okay, that's all set. We sped things up a little for you. You can see the results. We've got our 3 partitions. We're going to run an fdisk command on SDG just to see how things look. We've got our 3 partitions. Things look good. So first part's done. Partitions are ready. Let's add them to our VMs. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this next part of the equation. We've got our partitions all worked out. I found no easy way to do this in the graphical user interface. As a for instance, we've got a VM. This is what I'm going to add it to. I click Hardware. I click Add. Click Hard Disk. Don't really see anything else in here that's going to be of value to me. Click Hard Disk. SCSI, Vertio, doesn't really matter. Under Storage, there's only one device, and that's my local ZFS, which is actually my host's environment. Well, since this is for a backup drive, I don't really want to carve out space on the host's RAID array, although it could be used for that. But if something goes wrong there, then the whole thing's down, right? So we don't want to use that for a backup. And I don't see any accessibility to any of the partitions that I've created. I've looked everywhere in this interface. They don't show up. Okay, now this next part is a little bit tricky, so you're going to want to pay attention to this. This has been my experience, and I take no responsibility for anything that you do that might cause your own data's destruction. This is Frontier's world. There's very little available out on the web about this, and this is what I've discovered on my own. So you look at, in this case, 102, which is aimatter.dev, which is one of our domains, and we go down the list and we see we've got 6 SCSI drives that we've kind of strung together and created a mock ZFS environment. This has all been testing. When we assign this next drive from the command line, we've got to be careful not to trip over anything that's in here. In this case, we've used the SCSI adapter. If we look at a few others, we might see VirtIO adapters. There's different adapters that can be used when adding a hard drive. The important part is that you don't overwrite something that you currently have with this new one, because it'll wipe you out. So let's start with aimatter. I don't see any Vertio devices, so I'm going to use Vertio 0, which is kind of it's like adding a slot in your motherboard. Well, if these slots already exist, if I create a slot assignment, I've basically just taken out whatever was there and put in something else on the fly. Now, that material might be somewhere on your host. I don't know, but we don't want to go down that road. We don't want a disaster to happen to begin with, so just make sure you don't overwrite it. Now let's get back to the job at hand. Okay, so here is what we're doing. We're using the QM, which is a QEMU command. All of the Proxmox virtual machine environment is created using KVM technology, and QEMU is part of that. You can Google all that or look that up on your own. And we're going to set virtual machine 102. We're going to add a VirtIO adapter, and it's going to be number 0 to the partition dev SDG3, which is the last partition of the 3 that we created earlier. So let's just take a look. You see here 102 on the left is the machine that I want to affect. We can see we don't currently have any adapters named VirtIO 0. So we're okay to use that, and that's the partition we want to assign that to. Let's go ahead and press enter. All right, so that's done. We'll move this out of the way for just a minute. There, you can see it. So that's what I was going to do, is show you that it added it. It just added it, so now we have that device assignment right there. That could not be done through the graphical user interface. If I double click on that, you see it's grayed out, not something we have any ability to modify. Let's go ahead and start this VM so we can take a look at how we're going to access that. Okay, so I am currently SSH'd into the aimatter.dev virtual machine number 102, and what I found is that that drive is under an unusual, we'll do an fdisk L, we've got quite a few drives in there, a lot of loop devices, but instead of under dev, SD, whatever it is, it's under a VDA. You see it right here, disk VDA, a 4.5 terabyte drive. That's our drive. It shows up. It's usable. Why VDA? I didn't know. I dug into that just a little bit, and research tells me full virtualization versus para-virtualization. So VDA is the first detected para-virtualized disk driver. It's faster than emulated SDX devices if both are referred to all using the same disk. So less overhead and all the wonderful stuff that goes with it. So looks like VirtIO is the way to go, and that's why it says VDA. With that in mind, we're going to run this one-liner. Well, it's actually multiple commands broken up into one command. We're going to make label GPT on VDA1. That'll be the first script. Then we're going to run parted and make a primary ext4 partition from the 2048 sector to the remainder of the drive. That's the second script. And lastly, we're going to make the ext4 partition called VDA1. So let's go ahead and press enter on that. Okay, all that went according to plan. Let's take a look at what we've got. And we have our partition. Looks like it's just what we wanted. Now we're going to mount that to an existing directory called SM Backup. Make sure there's nothing in there. And if everything went well, we should have a lost and found directory inside SM Backup. And that's it. So we know that worked well. So that's one of the partitions mapped to one of the VMs. Let's do the other one, which is going to go a lot more quickly. Okay, so we're going to go back to the GUI. This time we're going to look at our VM number 104. We're going to take a look down, make sure there are no conflicting Virtio devices, because I already know from experience, if you assign a QEMU Virtio device to a partition in this way and it's already got a Virtio device in here, it will overwrite it. Same thing goes for a SCSI device. If you use a SCSI adapter instead of Virtio and you choose Virtio SCSI 2, it's going to overwrite SCSI 2, and whatever you've got in there is gone as far as I'm concerned. I have no way to know if there's a way to retrieve that or not. I don't ever want to know the answer to that question. So just make sure it's not already assigned. Virtio 0 is not assigned in this one, so we're going to assign it now. First, we're going to, well, you know what? I don't think it will work as a live server, but we're going to try it as a live server and see what happens. This server is running right now. All right, so there is virtual machine number 104. We're simply going to come back, change that 102 to a 104, and change SDG3 to SDG1. That leaves 2 available for some other purpose. And it's okay if it's Virtio 0 and it's a different VM. It is VM specific. Okay, so that's updated that. Let's see if it, yep, it already updated it in our UI. I don't imagine this is available to me immediately, but I'm going to look. Wow, it turns out that that was hot pluggable, and we do have a VDA in there with 5 terabytes. So we should be able to carry out that very same command. I'll just come over here and grab that. It's also called VDA, same thing. Don't see anything that needs to be different. Fire in the hole. I was certainly right in saying the second VM would go much more quickly than the first. Okay, we will run the same mount command on the same directory. And we now have a second directory available to us. I'm going to shut down and restart both of these machines just to make sure there are no side effects. Okay, you can see both VMs are shut down. We're going to start each one of them up. All right, good news is both of those machines started up without any problems. However, they did not mount the drive on the fly, so we need to edit our fstab and set that up, because we do want the backup drive to mount anytime this machine restarts. But one thing we're going to want to make sure that we do in our fstab is ensure that if the drive is not present for any reason, it doesn't fail to boot. And that's a common problem when setting a device in fstab. Okay, so we will append that to this last line. VDA1 to SM backup, ext4, and the important one right here is the no fail. Okay, we'll reboot that one, and we'll reboot that one. Okay, so when I rebooted those two servers, I found one of them mounted the backup directory just fine at boot, no problems. The other one did not, and I found out why it did not, because I previously had that backup drive mounted to a virtual device, which we don't want to use. So otherwise that one would have worked fine as well. I saw this error in my logs. Failed to create unit file, backup mount already exists in fstab, so that led me down the right solution. So that's going to be fine. Now we're going to physically remove the USB device that contains these two partitions and start these guys, make sure they still start. Okay, so I think I have found the solution to that problem. If you take a look at this directory, etc., PVE, QEMU server, and all your configuration files, you'll see one that matches up with each one of your servers. One of our servers, for instance, is the 104. If we take a look down at the bottom here, we see Vertio IO0, which we know is the drive that we added earlier. We can see it's mapped to partition SDG1. We're going to put a comma at the end of that and the statement optional equal 1, so it doesn't require it in order to start. Come back over here. We're going to refresh that, just kind of go out and go back in again so it picks up those settings. We'll click start. Now I notice that it showed it there a minute ago, but as soon as I set that it was optional, it recognized that it wasn't there and it just made it disappear from the lineup. But the machine's starting properly. So next we're going to have to see what happens when we plug the device back in again. Okay, I have verified that in this case our mail server started, no problem with the drive in the optional mode. So no difficulties there. The AI matter started the same way, no problem as long as it's disabled. So now let's plug that drive back in and see what happens. Okay, the drive has been plugged back in. We're going to now see if the partitions show up. They show up, but we've got some strangeness in the physical sector boundary. I mean, that's interesting because we ran that very same command previously before restarting it freshly right now, and we did not get those errors. So that caused me to dig in on that a little bit, and I have run these commands, parted dev SDG as alignment check for partitions 1, 2, and 3. In each case, they said the partitions are aligned. I haven't dug into all the numerical sequences to see if everything's divisible by the right numbers and things add up, as I don't have time for that right now, but things do look good, so I am just going to proceed. There are indicators that this is some kind of a false positive. Okay, now that it's reconnected, I'm coming over to my machines to see if they do show up, but they don't. So they have to be re-added again. Even though we've marked it as optional and all that, you would think that it would still maintain it there and just ignore the fact that it's missing, but it has in fact removed it, so it's got to be re-added. Now, it was the same command I've used the last time, but this time it says unable to parse value of Vertio 0 format error. And maybe it's because it's already in the configuration file. So we're going to remove both of those and see if that's all there is to it. That's a win. Okay, so we know we have to remove it from the configuration file manually before we can add it again. And the last one was on VM 104, mounting to partition 1. Worked like a charm. And we come back in here on our individual machines and we can see that things are as they were to begin with. So these are important steps. These fails are important steps because it's better to fail them here when it's not mission critical than to fail it after we're depending on them as backup drives. So, or have a whole server stop running and not know why. Now we know why. So we'll start that first server. We'll start that second server. Got a couple of green arrows showing up. Let's give it a minute and see what we've got. Okay, I am happy to announce that both partitions are attached, both servers booted up, both servers attached and mounted those partitions to the drives without any difficulty. So, wow, that was certainly a lot longer route to the finish line than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be important, and it was important to shut down, reboot, attach, not attach. Look at each one of these scenarios because it could become mission critical very quickly when you've set this all up the first time, and then any of those other scenarios that we walked through played out in real life, and your server wouldn't start, and you wouldn't know why, and I wouldn't know why. And whatever I'm doing here has got to be good enough for my infrastructure to run on it. I've got to be able to depend on it, and that's how you know that it's most likely going to be dependable in your particular situation. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you like what you saw, and if you're interested in being alerted when our videos come out first, make sure you click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.